Hello. Welcome, everyone, to the Evergreen Art Lecture Series. I'm Miranda Mellis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here to introduce our introducer for our art lecture today. But first, a word or two about the series. The series presents a broad range of interdisciplinary approaches to contemporary arts issues by artists, writers, activists, and scholars. Our ongoing aim is to bring an array of practitioners from a variety of fields, areas of inquiry, and creative production active in the world beyond campus. The series provides a lively forum for the exchange of ideas between the speakers, students, faculty, staff, and public. All lectures are free and open to the public. This quarter, the series has had an ecological emphasis. We have been bringing practitioners to the college who, in various ways, through various genres and modalities, from journalism and cinema to performance, poetry, and visual art, communicate within a range of publics about intertwined issues concerning ecology and climate change. For our last lecture in week 6, we were honored to engage with Washington State Poet Laureate Rena Priest. This week, we are so delighted to welcome poet and artist Roberto Harrison. Our introducer and interlocutor for Roberto is our own professor, Eirik Steinhoff. Dr. Steinhoff currently teaches in the Prior Learning Education program here at Evergreen. In the past, he's taught at University of Chicago, Bard College, and Mills College. He's the author of a book called A Fiery Flying Rule, co-published by Station Hill Press and Publication Studio, a devotee of forests, and a member of the Legacy Forest Project, as well as a board member at the Center for Responsible Forestry. Welcome to Eirik and Roberto.
Thank you so much, Miranda, and thank you for curating such a wonderful quarter of art lectures. I also wanted to express thanks to Raul and Vivian and Felicia, who are providing invaluable tech support to make these art lectures operate so smoothly, and also appreciation to Julie Ron for offering support as well. It's a wonderful session that we're going to have this morning with poet Roberto Harrison. I've known Roberto for many years. We first met when I was living in Chicago. I have a few words by way of introduction. Roberto was born in Oregon, so the Pacific Northwest is part of Roberto's story. His parents are Panamanian. He and his family moved to Panama when he was young, and then to Delaware in 1969. Roberto pursued studies in mathematics and computer science as an undergraduate, and did a year of graduate work in mathematics at Indiana University in Bloomington. He's traveled the United States, Europe, and North Africa. Most recently, Roberto was the Milwaukee Poet Laureate for 2017 to 2019. And in addition to poetry, Roberto is a very active and agile visual artist. And we'll get an opportunity today to see some examples of that work. His books include Counter Demons, Bridge of the World, and most recently, Tropical Lung. And then it's got a subtitle, Exists or Exits, or you get a kind of choose your own adventure with the parentheses. But Tropical Lung is the name of Roberto's most recent book. He was also the co-editor of a journal called Crayon. And I would encourage you to seek out Roberto's work on the page. It's an absolutely wonderful thing to behold. I wanted to share a quote from a recent essay about Roberto's work, and then I'll hand things over to Roberto. But first, I wanted to let you all know I will come back after Roberto has presented on his work for about an hour, and I will facilitate the Q&A portion of today's art lecture. The way you can get your question posed is by using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen here. So as questions bubble up for you, I would encourage you to type those questions into the chat. I'll be able to work through those in the last 20 minutes or half hour of our session. So please be sure to use that Q&A function. And then let me conclude my introduction with a quote from Kimberly Lyons, writing about Roberto's work. This is a poetic situated within a fluid location. Bridge of the world comes from a place that receives signals from myriad sources and processes through language in a profoundly complex way. Relays in a singular co-creative response within the universe, and I mean capital U universe, coordinated to cosmic vectors and simultaneously attuned to apprehension of the biological, etymological, and zoological in particular, as these strands of activity emit vibration within the poet's sphere of reception. The poems enact an awareness of a complex present as the body of the poet moves through this present, yet also coordinates to a far fathomable, intuited future. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Roberto. Welcome to Evergreen, Roberto.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric, Miranda, Raul, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. This is the name of my presentation. It's Mr. Abya Yala. I'm from Panama, and it's dedicated to Daryl Alejandro Holness and Aristides Iquaquiliquinia Turpana. Mr. Turpana was a fierce advocate for indigenous rights in Latin America. And Daryl is a young Panamanian American poet that I had the pleasure of doing a reading with him and Janice Miller a few months ago. At the end of that reading, Daryl sort of announced Abya Yala, and I had already read about Abya Yala through Turpana's work. And Abya Yala also comes up at the end of the introduction to a book called Comparative Indigeneities. But after Daryl had announced it, I looked into it further, and it turns out to be a widespread movement outside of Latin America now. And so I'll be talking about my work in general and how I am reflecting upon this term. Abya Yala. This is a Guna name for the Americas. It means tierra en plena madurez, land in full maturity. Tierra de vida, land of life. Tierra en florecimiento, land in bloom. Also perhaps land of blood, land of vital blood, and or the land of life in abundance. Abya Yala has become the name for a popular movement in support of human rights for indigenous peoples, African American people. I add LGBTI plus people, women, as well as for decolonization of the Americas and for the allies of these struggles. Guna molas are the single most influential art form of my life. I will show some molas in a few slides. The Guna are the tribe of people that Mr. Turpana belonged to. In Panama, there are 7 Indian tribes. Daryl is also Choco, which is it's an old word that refers to actually 2 tribes, the Embera and the Wunan. And I'll go over some of the things related to that in a few slides. But first and foremost for me at this point, Abya Yala is a potent and endlessly generative mystery. Is it already here underlying everything? This is a map that I found on YouTube in a video discussing Abya Yala. Abya Yala is a Guna name for the Americas, as I mentioned. It is now a world movement to decolonize. In this map, it looks like it's upside down. Panama is in between the 2 big red land masses between South America and North America. In this case, Abya Yala Sur and Abya Yala Norte. Molas Molas are the fabric art of the Guna people of Panama and Colombia. By now, there are uncountably many molas throughout the world. Much of the time, people know about Panama because of molas. Molas are a first foundational book of Abya Yala. I am making that claim. Everything can be found in them. These are two young Guna women. The molas that I grew up with are mostly red and black, like the one next to the woman on the left. But as you can see, it includes all kinds of colors, and they're generally made in pairs. Often the pairs are each of the pairs is the same. Sometimes they're different. This is a mola that's in our bedroom that I see every morning. And I like to think of it as me and Brenda with our baby puppy Maya between us, the circle of our lives together, and there's a gourd at the bottom. This mola I had two of. Like I said, they're made in pairs. The other of this pair I have given to Will Alexander, the poet living in California. Besides everything that's already very beautiful there, Panamanians are animate and inanimate. Panama is a faraway place. It is a place of many fishes in the homeland of the liminal, though it is not limited to the liminal. It is a crack in the egg of the world, the in-between. It joins the oceans to the sea. It joins the hemispheres of the earth and of the mind of the earth as a bridge of the world. It is a place of many butterflies. It is a link allowing for a symbol of the bicycle. The bicycle is a yogic machine. Panama is shaped like a snake, a supremely yogic animal. The third space, as I define it, grows from everything in Panama, even in the partisan and the otherwise not in between. Panamanians are first and last of every form, of every color, of every shape, of every persuasion, speaking every language, on and on, with no center or origin necessarily observable. Subjectivity, intersubjectivity without centers, origins, or maintainable boundaries. Panama as spiritual state is made up of all possible valences. Panama's population is infinite and uncountable. There is no boundary to Panama in any of the 7 directions. I came to this country from Panama when I was 7. Did I ever leave? Endless disorder of origin in all directions. The heart of a Panamanian is evenly distributed throughout the multiverse, partly because of its evenly distributed nervous system. The cockroach is a Panamanian's totem insect, or can be. As such, Panamanians have no identifiable center. The Panamanian person is not bound by any Western or Eastern category or mode. The Panamanian person is not limited to flesh. The cubit is yogic. The cubit is Panamanian. Every valence in between true and false exists in Panama's tropics. The cubit as first foundation of Mestizaje for fours, all 4 colors, all colors of mankind. Panama's most basic arrangement is a quaternary instead of a trinity through Abya Yala, or a 4. The intermediate link exists. Sri Aurobindo on truth consciousness. Panama is an intermediate link. Panamanians are intermediate links. Panama is an origin mode of Abya Yala. Panama comes from an origin state. That's sort of a pun on Oregon State, where my dad went to school. Panama is my home in the darkness. Yo casi siempre soy el único panameño, el primero y el último. Así somos todos los panameños en todos los mundos. ¿Quieres ser amigos? Let fly what will fly. Let it come down like a storm of fearful rinpoches. What language remains at the end of my migration, my plane alone as an infant back to Panama, to forget always? What were the tears that brought back the sloth, the coconuts flown to impoverish each conversation from the end of time as now? No towel there, but what I searched for, a combination in the ceiling marked by dots, I tried to gain entry into heaven, but did not. Angels have bargained for me that the sea will not replace her own animals with the ones I've meant to bring from the light, to arrive with the impoverished, always sent to negotiate troubles in the canal by phone and through digital voicing. Far away, it began with cocuyitos, a plain effort. Nature to mimic us now. Computers will gradually disappear, but the light remains now that our networks take on the work of survival. The flash entered into a slave machine. A caste system wades into water and saves itself from annihilation, with annihilation, from the salt that their frozen trauma, like mine, will sever. In its projectiles, the force field increases with a shelter that is destroyed, the hiding place from future heat and salvation. Remember that one serves to reveal the shattered image of true self-knowledge, the instantaneous errors of friendship that the moon ails to arrive at this tearing off of skin that will remain with the promises, the ritual entry of flags and prayers that the nest of snakes reveals to be one. There is no real survival value to practices, no real insight into the heart of the universe, except that in blindness, I see with the troubles that a single soul might make, a soul to be one and two, to eliminate the entrances and exits from the sphere of networks, which includes the entire universe. Some stopped writing because they had written their dreams so well. I could not stop because I am just beginning to dream, just beginning to see through myself in the world, not so that I could become invisible to you again, but to write invisibly through my heart, the residence of my mind, evenly distributed throughout endless imaginations, oceans. I write the release of a night sky because my reptilian anchor, the frozen tundra of my traumas, will break off as ice flows, as the earth does now, and we will be one together to remake the poles, to place them elsewhere, to find a new constellation that travels with us through the end of monuments and compassion. And it's our own fault for not believing in the power of the wilderness, in the power of the ancients, of the imagination's seas, in the events of a bridge which serves solely to manifest as a fourth form, Panama, its two yogas of the earth and of the waters, between the sea and the ocean, its many fishes that claim us to fly as butterflies, and remember that the Apostle Islands claim the capital of the Ojibwa here in their residence, with the ashes of my past pass through into the lake of the pioneers and back to Panama. Cry again, for you shall see how the moments have split inside to deliver us from the possible life of the extremes of the most noble exhaustion. Don't tell me again that there's a hierarchy from which we cannot remove ourselves. I've seen it. That breathing will bring it all together. As I cannot breathe, and I do not see. Kindness is the main objective. I use Saloma ways of reflection between face and interface, and between outer faces and interfaces to make text now. Saloma is a hyperfacial antidote to our screen-mediated lives. Face-to-face knowledge that we are losing might be found in those who know how to practice Saloma. Saloma prompts an aware mirroring of the machine to transcend the machine. It also prompts a co-evolvement with other life forms, hybrid, spiritual, or cultural, but also otherwise. Saloma Panameña is a reflection mode, configuration mode, a peak of origin mode, a way of making of Abya Yala. So this picture at the top here is a slide from a Saloma Panameña video. It's a profound practice that's ancient and it's Panamanian. It's, you hear sort of parts of it in a lot of folk music in Panama. If you're interested, I or Iric can send you a link to this video. I'm not going to show it here now because I got to focus on these slides the way I have them. So when I read a poem along with the drawing, they're all part of my work, but they're not directly related. Most of the drawings that I'll be showing, I will be showing in silence for 7 seconds. This is an example of a text. The previous drawing was an example of a text. I will show other drawings that are kind of squiggly line drawings that were sort of proto-texts, came before, but I'm mixing them up in this presentation. Talking from the other side of the word, writing from the other side of the page, composing from the other side of the screen, from the other side of circuitry, words from the earth towards words from Abya Yala. A new kind of yoga is needed to allow the advanced cyborg to succeed in being human. And a new kind of yoga is needed to learn to be Abya Yalansis, a native of Abya Yala. That's a term that I learned from Mr. Turpana. And actually, Abya Yala also includes the Philippines in some cases that I've seen. Yoga here is meant as a putting together. In my work, especially as a putting together of the light and of the dark. And after Cecil Taylor, I am dark to myself. And perhaps I may be light to the sun as the earth. To wonder is to be incomplete. Clarice Lispector, she was born in the Ukraine. My most fundamental intention is to make dream alliances. Creative work is a kind of truth of wonder. Silence, learning from silence. The ringing in our ears that I once thought of after John Cage as being caused by our nervous system. The inner sound in all of us, as John Cage heard in the silence chamber. But as I have recently been reminded by the poet Robert Kosick, this sound is actually commonly known as the unstruck sound. It is beginningless and endless and can serve as an object of meditation. According to Robert, it has been known by poets, rishis, since before the beginning of this universe. This high-pitched sound is loud everywhere now, and I think it might be what forms silence. It is a link between us and the seasonal metallic sound of the cicada, which brings on the cyborg. But also, silence is where I am from. I am formed by the unstruck sound through silence, through a decentralized sound, through a decentralized silence. If we follow John Cage's mistake of thinking of the unstruck sound as being the sound of the nervous system, by misprision, it might imply then that we realize our nervous system as being decentralized and infinite, if everyone and everything can hear it everywhere at any time, without beginning and without end. This idea of a decentralized nervous system comes from what I understand of the nervous system of the cockroach. The cockroach is one of my spiritual ancestors. So is the snake. The snake makes circles in me. But the cockroach apparently has no brain proper. If you crush its head, it can walk away. From this seed, perhaps we can create our possible futures in more transformative ways. I at least know from experience that one can feel pain far outside what is normally considered the body. Our bodies extend more than we generally know. And to move past mere survival, we can think of our nervous system as being evenly distributed throughout the multiverse, rooted in our bodies, but also far beyond and without center, therefore more likely to survive. But to move past mere survival, I reach out to the other endless spiritual ancestors, ocelot, tapir, jaguar, the horse, the Amazon, the Congo, the Pyrenees. Writing is healing. Often I find that I am settled with a poem when, while reading it aloud, I feel that I air out a profound wound located throughout my body, but especially in the area around my heart and my throat. This is a very raw and visceral experience which defies easy explanation. In this sense, vulnerability is non-conceptual, and I aim at a cosmic vulnerability. It's as if I need to go beyond any capacity I have to conceptualize in order to get to any truly healing energy in my work. I cannot heal myself without going beyond myself, and from there, allowing myself to be rearranged from what I am at the present moment, letting the light in which is also beyond me. I need to continually find new ways of airing the wound because my windows to it always close in time. And so I do not believe in stylizing or conceptualizing uncertainty. This fact has no clear implication as to the needed form of a given poem. And poems sometimes take on this quality for me after some time, where the quality can be otherwise time dependent. A nearly impossible aim is to get past this time dependency. Apocalypse. I'm an apocalyptic person. I have circles tattooed on my palms rotating in opposite directions. They are my anti-stigmata and imply my intention to make a wholeness of my life. When my hands are put together, everything stops. I have had 12 major psychotic breaks. They are my 12 apostles of nothing. These days, I am starting to feel more natural than I have in a long time. I have been so fearful of the world so much of my life. I am not so fearful now. In my apocalypses, I encounter a great mystery, with the veil of the earth removed. Abya Yala is beyond my understanding from here. I approach it now by vision and by ghost. The end of the world has already occurred. Timothy Morton. I am Indian, black, and white. Red and black is all over my work. I'm the red and black cluster of beings. I work at the Indian Community School of Milwaukee. Indians have faced apocalypse for 500 years. I try to learn there by osmosis and invisibility. There are 4 Indian languages officially supported by the community at ICS: Ho-Chunk, Ojibwe, Menominee, and Oneida. I hear the drummen singing almost every day. The Indian community that I am aware of in Milwaukee is multiracial and multicultural. Many tribes are represented at the Indian Community School and in Milwaukee. Will Alexander is cosmically indigenous to the whole of the earth. He is also the alone with the alone. Nathaniel Mackey is writing a tribal poetics, the tribe from the band through music, where the one is many and the many is one. Non-linear body, the body is earth. Cecilia Vicuña. It is time to turn the earth. Jimmy Durham. There is no earth corresponding to the infinite horizon of the global, but at the same time, the local is much too narrow, too shrunken to accommodate the multiplicity of beings belonging to the terrestrial world. Bruno Latour. Partly, I make placeholders for ancient consciousness from Abya Yala to be recovered into in the future, in habitations for now. The change in climate makes interiors of words sprout and root themselves in the earth before us. artificial intelligence? Will emphatically binary thinking be obviated? How do we respond to the dawn of ubiquitous artificial intelligence? Robots are already creating their own languages that humans cannot understand. Soon, AI will be adept at adding to misinformation. Artificial life, not a thing and not a human, completely other ontology. How do we respond to the dawn of ubiquitous robots? Something of our internal life has to be shared with them if they are to grow. Do we structure our own internal lives to transmit? No, I want no roads inside. Return of the circle for Abya Yala, the gourd. So there are many different patterns that different cultures use here that are native. So it's not all the circle, it's not all the gourd. It's a lot of things. What seeds of old new spiritualities and philosophies can we discover through computer technology? From the bit to the qubit, new gradations possible in between, simultaneities, binary encryptions may soon be obsolete. Relativity theory is necessary for understanding the universe, but so far computer science is not. Sharon Lanier. Is it possible to discover new worlds within through computer technology, life, a newly discovered aspect of the earth? I belong to the earth. How do I belong to Abya Yala? With or without computers? Past binary, before it? As technology changes everything, we here have a chance to discover that by pushing tech as far as possible, we can rediscover something in ourselves that transcends technology. Sharon Lanier again. Bringing language back to the mystery instead of the function. Catherine Christer Hennicks's higher intuitive mathematics implies a higher intuitive cybernetics or a higher intuition. Silence does not fear. I smile when I see these words, yet I am not silent enough. See the silence eclipse the sun? It must be as the heart does within the ocean of a sea through sounds of La Pintada, to make a whole meaning of it, which explodes on occasion, a self-exploding vision, sticks and stones and leaves. This I will be ready for. My body opened with the books of the worlds of the silent that I lick and read with my tongue of silence and sound, apart and together again, to dream myself piercing through hatred into a snake again, a red and black snake, followed from the forms of light that it breathes, the forms of light in the eternal world of the blind that do not consider and do not divide, a link to be more than flesh. Give up the view that will not square the circle. Give it up for the quaternary of every rain that harms you. I aim to be a dissolving witness, a faraway wilderness with a robust interface made of light, illusory but made to allow me to walk in the world of roads, while in my heart I have no roads, bewildered in the midst of the planets and their faraway visits, a self-sustaining solid wilderness, one with no time and no seeing. It breaks into what seems to be an absent world without a world, except through the light. Noise of Eden. I remake the image made of light. The thorns of synchronicity wrapped in horses' hides, stretched across the prairie fields of the restful ambulance. I tell a story of the power of the bus, of wilderness, a siren, one at the beginning of the salt, surrounded by the redness of the sea, the light of darkness, the light of the invisible, through nomenclatures of the harvesting bird, of the foams of contagion, of the excellent distances which crowd us there, absorbing other levels of the storms of the world, we form the balls of infancy and retrace our ancient solitary travels through the completed palms of prehistory. We wander the earth as I now wander our plague-ridden host. I cross a swinging bridge which knows no water except the sevens that I count here and in the place I go to, which has no roads and no mouth. A form's made by water as the ocean splits it to bring the worlds together of the light and of the clouds, the fusing tar on fire of a unitive release, fumes for the soil that breathes in the occluded winds of a morning's indelible, electrified and silent source of the field. The last colors, snowed into the interior, mustard seed, grain of rice, formed and unformed radiations. A new sun beyond the poles makes a gift of itself to the unconditioned, a gift from no doctor. It's always there, burning through a song of cognition. Planes pass on the content of extermination. The West is ignorant of the world, but it believes in its totem, despite the ground that will never be owned. I am not from any direction because I have folded in on myself to attract wandering. There is no wandering profanity. There, I eclipse my own visions with the elderly dreaming on their own. At least they dream. All planets must know that the earth now changes toward what was promised long ago, in not returning to the absent interior of life. Know that our blood makes a mark on the world to signify a new mind of the moon, to symbolize through patterns and affections, to save again what the world was once. So this drawing sort of addresses a series of notebooks that I hand wrote. Every once in a while I had to go through a period of putting my body to the page to reground myself or something. And this drawing kind of covers all those notebooks that I filled. And the writing is generally illegible. And some poems came out of this drawing or out of this period that were the two that started Yaviza, my book Yaviza, called Break and Bochica. And this is an example of that writing. Yunakachukma is Choctaw. It means good night. I'm not sure if it's the greeting or just the phrase. Mute and sink. There are only reparations to see there. Only interfaces made to endure the mob in a plane that does not absorb any light. Remove the divine from my false consciousness. Remove it so that I can be true. true in the sense of the oceans, true in the sense of my cruelty, which will never abandon you, true in the sense of the attacks that I witness at my own funeral, that they will deliver the last blow, the parking lot full of forgotten people, that they will see that I am not standing or laying down or even in a shelter, the shelter now that grows to devolve into the stable and ejected heart of primordial death, the death that equates cruelty with the love of an animal. The aim of this poem is to unwind what you haven't seen in you and me, to turn inward and confront the black sphere that for so many has caused fear and sorrow. I must be that darkness, the hidden valley in the assault of righteousness, the oppression that we feel at the ends of severe control and delivery, the ambush under our bed that says that you are not to be trusted, that says that the game is nocturnal and follows the logic of the asteroids as I write with it, the mind iridium from outer space, not to be confused with another world. It is here, and it always will be. Stealth beckons you with the CIA and the eternal removal of historical page swaps, the unknown of where I become the shadow, to open the casket here again and to slither like worms and snakes into the hiding place of darkness. What is it about that darkness that will not surrender to your divine improvisations? Remove all entries marked by kindness and compassion in this book, and you will see what I am after. It is not anger, it is not hatred, it is not lacking in love, but it does remove the pretty bags from your desperate shopping. It cannot be called erasure. I am not fusing the poles or trying to see the goodness in you. I believe that we have destroyed over and over, and that there's no room for us to talk of love because it is the most non-trivial thing and because it must be stopped. Not the love that you put a word for, but the eternal vagabond of deception that stratifies the looser ends of our souls. Let me make this clear, that I do not love as one. These instances will remain with a warmth and tenderness that forms the ideal and proceeds to murder hundreds of thousands of people. I am that darkness so that we can better remain alone, better execute in the light what new world we are afraid of, what new fundamentalism here can show to be flat but dangerous. I am taking sides in this war as I pacify the machete under my bed, a mark of my Latinidad that holds you to the gruesome view of death that many will return to out of fascination and not denial. We all die, and we all die again. In this darkness, there is no place for the working world. There is no place for an engine meant to cool off in a winter night. There is no other side that you will aim for, as these are not ideals. These are not the seeds that will carry you further through disaster, but they are the winds of these that knock our shelters down and open the real wound, the one we made ourselves, the one which is pure evil in our hearts, to remember that it can be filled by something other than light. No saintly reader can bring anything to this poem, and no devil will ever understand it. So these are some terms from Western science that I use sometimes in thinking through things. Intermediate area is Central America. Prehistorically, that area was seen as being sort of rhizomatically organized culturally speaking, which was different than the empires nearby that had profound cycles of rise and collapse. and more stable because they were rhizomatic. And then I sort of consider these periods before European contact, Middle Woodland period, Mississippi era, where the mounds, when the mounds were built. In these eras, apparently there were cities here that were bigger than the cities in Europe. And the Midwest I associate with liminality and in between. And now Abya Yala. This is an old map of Panama. And this is Madison, which is a city nearby Milwaukee, where I am. Madison is the only city in the country built on an isthmus. And once when I was in a visionary state, wandering around in my car in a very intense thunderstorm, I wandered around for hours, and I found myself in a small town called Darien. And Darien turns out to be the name of the jungle in Panama. It's also the name of my first book that I never published. So I find ways to see Panama here. So this is Mark Rothko, the painter that was famous for making squares, and sort of reflecting upon also the face paint of the Great Plains. This is a finger painting. Decolonization. Cesar Vallejo is Peruvian modernist poet. Indio después del hombre y antes de él. Indian after man and before him. N. Scott Mombade, Kiowa writer. The Americas have always been Indian and they always will be Indian. That's a very profound and very, very complex thing to say, and I'm trying to do everything in my life to honor that statement. Albert Ayler, American jazz composer, Universal Indians. Cecil Taylor, American jazz composer, with his albums Algonquin, Conquistador, and Dark to Themselves. And Catherine Christer Hennicks, who's trans and a Swedish musician, visual artist, and mathematician and poet. Poetry written at the edge of the end of a civilization must differ in its aims from the poetry written from within the assumptions of its own unquestioned center. So these are some thoughts that kind of frame what I do. Poetry heals the wounds inflicted by reason, Novalis. Where are we really going? Always home, Novalis. The universe never began. How do you start at the beginning if things happen before they happen? If before the prehistory there were already the apocalyptic monsters? Abya Yala. That's Clarissa Spector. The unstruck sound also just doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end. In the end, poetry will unify everything. Jose Lezama Lima. Inner space is as infinitely explorable as spaces of the earth. Edouard Glissant. States of consciousness there are in which death is only a change in immortal life. Pain, a violent backwash of the waters of universal delight. Limitation, a turning of the infinite upon itself. Evil, a circling of the good around its own perfection. And this not in abstract conception only, but in actual vision and in constant and substantial experience. Sri Aurobindo. Any and all signs pointing to this or that place should be ignored. One should always go to the place for which there is no sign. Henry Miller. The poet is a mediator. He connects the near to the far. Blanchot. Time does not go away. Dogen. Perhaps there is no return for anyone to a native land, only field notes for its reinvention. James Clifford. Without knowing it, we live at the same time in myriads of universes revealed, perhaps only in death. Jabé. I am homeless as the earth is homeless. The term Mobilian comes from Mobila. Mobila is a new psychic origin for a multiverse. Mobila is another psychic origin for Mestizaje and beyond. A Mestizaje for fours and for the gourd. An all-color Mestizaje allied to Abya Yala in dreams and in life. Endless disorder of origin in all directions. Mobilian is a language which is being both found again and created for the first time in making texts. It is an origin language for psychic and symbolic Mestizaje, moving against racism and toward a more all-inclusive idea of the human. Mestizaje's basic idea of mixture extends toward new forms of humanity in Mobilian, whether these forms of humanity be hybrid or not. Mobilian is verb-based and fluid. It is a sound language grown from the earth in Abya Yala, and it is never written and never heard. It grows from an abyss to raise consciousness of interrelation and hidden eternal fires. It is an language of the original face that belongs to the earth here. I first heard of Mobilian through the hand-dyed symbolists who were everywhere in the Americas before contact, especially within what is now known by some as the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex. Mobilian is a visual language, a language of line and shape and color. It is also a language of return and of recursive words that extend towards every outside while maintaining every solitude. Mobilian expands considerations of death, with death as more than nothing, with it also as a placeholder for counting and birth inside the ancient worlds of the Americas, inside of Abya Yala. Mobilian takes its root from Mobilian jargon, a southeastern North American Muskogean-based trade pidgin language that included words from many Indian languages and eventually included words from European and African languages. The last known fluent speaker of Mobilian jargon survived until the late 20th century. Mobilian is internal to Mobilian jargon. Mobilian is a language in internal life now as it was before. It is a language texts use to speak to each other and to work out the cultures and the possibilities of the Tecumseh Republic. By definition, texts spawn cultures in Mobilian by organizing around the main principle of generosity, not around greed. The term Mobilian comes from Mobila, which was a Trojan horse town that Proto-Choctaw Tuscaloosa used as a trap to lure DeSoto into an ambush. William Carlos Williams is the only other poet I know of to consider Mobila in the American grain, but I was not following him when I began to consider the imaginal implications of Mobila. I was following myself. The Battle of Mobila was among the first major conflicts between Europeans and Native Americans in North America. Some say it was located in what is now southern Alabama. By locating a psychic and symbolic origin at Mobila, I assert that love is always present, even in conflict. In my story, Tuscaloosa won, and so did Tecumseh. As we said in those days, and as we say now, we lured them with death, the plural here being specific to a single consciousness, with no time except what is heard from the shelves and the shores of Panama. All my books are translations from the Mobilian. Mobilian transforms mobile technologies into aspects of nature that can only be understood by a tech in their element. Mobilian provides interiors for Abya Yala. Mobilian makes all technology mobile in some way. Mobilian is rooted in being a tech. I am making something Mobilian through sevens in tropical lung. Mobilian jargon is where the Caribbean and indigeneity are put together for harmony, desirable dissonance, and life. Mobilian is a language texts use to speak to each other and to work out the cultures and the possibilities of the Tecumseh Republic and how it relates to Abya Yala. Tecumseh Republic. Society rooted in the ancient past here, at least through substantial reflection and ghostly aspect, if not directly, in respecting the privacy and desired separateness of native cultures here. A present and future society of Abya Yala. Panama is its only entry and its only exit. From a tall, thin hill there, where the air is more full than here. Coincidentally, one of 7 Baha'i centers of the world, beautifully and profoundly designed in a way reflective of native aesthetics. One must be at the peak of the origin mode of Panama to reach the Tecumseh Republic and move toward Abya Yala, to just begin to consider Abya Yala, even though we may already be inside of it. The Tecumseh Republic is formless and does not determine form or formlessness. Text. Citizen of the Tecumseh Republic. Tech alliances are the anti-corporations of tropical lung. Techs are endlessly proliferating instances of beings. Techs are techs too. Techs belong to the earth and they return to the earth. Techs are who I see and how I see. They transcend technology and are fluent in its ways. Tecumseh Republic extends the possibilities of being human with a face and with the interface further than what is possible with a face alone. Mobilian is rooted in being a tech. Tech spawn cultures in Mobilian by organizing around a principle of generosity, not around greed. Techs are born in silence and return to the silence past what is seen. Techs arrive in 7s and depart in 4s. If I reach silence in reading a poem I wrote or in making a drawing of a tech, which becomes the beings of a tech, it becomes something that I can belong with. Silence is where I am from. I am a tech when I see past the screen. Techs are native to Abya Yala beyond computers. Tech knowledge. Infinite shifting is at the forefront of the speech of the palm trees. In the womb collapsed by signs, the ship plows through each donkey's artificial pointers as we wander the slope to the flower and orient the faces of the night. Speaking is silent by the continental mound as the flies float up past the desert surfaces of our longing to be objects of catastrophe. Things speak their own languages and reflect past our origins as they pull it all behind the screen to canoe the electrified. Nothing survives. All of life looks to the screen to cross the neutral. The psychic not stay behind us as death proceeds. I am not the light. I do not exchange electrons with your bodies. I escape and call you to return to the fire to begin. We receive the visions. All is born in the anti-silence of the Amazon as we mold the divine, and the giant leaves and the long necks call us to be true to the arrow. She teaches us to walk the red and the black and to make Saloma, the future of the ancient hollows and documents with a starred at Mobilian between everything. The rabbits of the rabbis in the caves of Spain become the smoke at Pipestone. The maiden semblance without eyes tastes the fold of death and makes the buffalo born. Every city of mounts, every twilight, every sphere of night brings us the circles to see 7. I sing for the sun. I am born in the stars. I have no light of my own, and I abide because of the mystery and dissolve our lunar life. Native reversal. What brings me to share that the train fails to compromise shadows, that the sea will not return my hunting, for the colors of the plants I embrace, the extinguished exceptions, the adorned monuments raised to the ampersand quality of the ground. I was not here to receive or to see the skin-planted origins as I move through the protections of the starlight, which now abandon my face. I was not won by the music which shatters the morning. I am not the vision that you feel by the mute, as I have contorted my own two tongues for the sea. Without hope, I continue to dissolve past my future arrivals to an Indian god, and I return my palms to the horses as they run out of food. The shattering sunrise now projects me to your viewers as the interior messages of my animals continue to vibrate. The opening of my sheltered destructions does not return my wounds as I no longer speak again. And once the exception to paradox sings itself out, I will again see China by my first time as a country and will no longer bridge without you. Drum dream. Where was my race when the ashes were made and I burned red to be one in black? Now the empty sign of the saviors makes me room to breathe in a feathered light. The bowl of refuge strengthens the deer of my body, and I sing with Panama as my home in the darkness. Other songs make it to my dreams. The drum pulls the lights together with the revealing names of the rocks. I listen to the fish and hear the guitar lead decay in another long song. The quiet hears my mute bodies as we collapse again with the drum. They know as I have seen my pages meet them in the circle as they teach me the songs of survival and the electric escapes. I sing with them past apocalypse to be known by their animals, invisible in the invisible woodland as I migrate through seven and reside as an ash of the braided earth, absolute as separation. Okay, this is the last poem. It's 5 pages, 5 stanzas, I mean, and these black and white drawings. After this, I'll show some color drawings in silence, and that'll be it. On another kind of Indian, as seen by disconnected sparrow, as told by Mississippi's snake, to the absence and silence of Panama, for David Paulus. I am another kind of Indian for the sun and for the fire. Before I read anything, I speak. My words are carried over a big river with a commentary of light. Animal dreams penetrate the receivers and our cubital organs. Red bleeds through my black and white knots and settles there with the final insects as they mark the 11 places. When I speak once, there is more. When I speak twice, there is less. My origin consists of every climate, as each seed of the sky grows feet for the center of the earth. It moves violently with the heat and becomes a multiplier. The drum plants my songs for the lake, and my disappearance makes us speak silently with the fire as it swells life into the grandfather stones. I am inside of our feast of becoming the light as the earth turns inside of each of us. We appear to speak less to the offerings, but we say more with the fire of the sun. I am not one of the songs, but I am 2 of the songs, or 3, and then 4 becomes me with a 7 inside. My family were long knives and sugar canes on 2 trees and 2 palms, but more so the hand-eye symbolist for emptier hosts to recover the islands and mainland and suffer for red. I am a small color of twilight and the least friend of the moon, with circular comments relaxing my face and with oceans washing my feet. My struggle for color builds swamps in a high rise and crumbles a city that calls me with stop signs. Each of the others were more of a color, but none of them lost what I lost in the cluster. The cluster is welcome to die with the tag as I force my way in through the exit. We become one with the fire and the shade. The tag is a document endless with roots to the lake, but my reading is more like the ancient recovery mask of the woman I see with a packet of dust by my side. The sea calls us there as I welcome the land that devours me. No single line moves toward salvation. I, as they die more than once, to recover and strengthen the source through our horses. I know that the grass is a sponge for our blood, that the trees are the perfection of night of the earth. I am called by inanimate people and ponder their voting for sons as I lay out the seeds of the forest of living and thought without knowing to see. The frame of their windows becomes me as glass reflects all of the ghosts of the north that won't follow the line without water. The water is memory stored by the crucible cubit and heightened arboreal designs for the future of action. It moves to become the allure of the morning dissolved by the tunes for the wind of the log to cross over the river. Fire gives me separate carcasses wandering out to the veils and the death of each origin marked for the sun. The sun does not populate others as winter removes all the rules of the wolves as they wander through sweat. Winter pronounces my name in the tropics as others find hosts to rewrite all the labels of thought on the chairs as we sit on the earth with no message. The horses are troubled by snakes and the snowstorm dissolved by the thatch of a whisper and trails that move silence to travel through night. The stars have the keys for interior treasures as stories with scriptures of long ago distant recovery capture the wind of the morning for wandering fire. 5 heads on one body feed for dark matter. Solids as liquids and liquids as solids return to the snow. Many fall out with the surf as a person with wind and the breath of the sun moves up in the wake. They walk to the sea with the origin changing the flows. Without people, the meat gets unsteady and prattles for winter, deciding who's lost and who's night. But meat has no service to die, and the service it does have requires every morning to speak, and wandering out of the circle makes us collect with the forces that ink does not see. Even in spring when the elk are around, and the writing and drawing collects every forest to spur on the tracks and decide what the morning will speak. Even when someone improves with a song as they sleep and anoints all the others with smoke, even then the alarming and slow are my trails to the end. I run with the earth and we meet with the gourds of our patterned philosophy prayers as we send out the skeletal cages and meet. With the earth I am flowing with horses and stopping with mud in the river that washes my heart to belong to the songs, the beat of our heart and our start in uncomputable worlds. Eyes they find as a tech in my mind, with the neutral engagement with dust marks of birds to return and the paths on my night for the twilight of purity falling for death. Our memories cut into sacred intentions and force every function to fail under promises left to the sun. As the sweat puts together interior insight to bring back the ground, every link that increases the fire as a magnet collects for the sea, my ghosts start to play of the red and the black put together to be with a focus of cognitive vacancy maps. Each place that we meet for the drum with my version of singing becomes like the salt of the ocean far under the ground. The songlight repeats and restarts the alignments of climates to stop the allures of deception and mark us with links for the real. I magnify mental escapes as the season becomes with a separate angle relates to the dust and the flesh on the ground. My attachment to worlds as a separate me, as a sea, into messages left to the night. As the wolves become one, I as they run to be tech before zero, it moves. But already the tech has a floor to replace with a night as the day comes undone and our fires have returned to be morning. Our ghosts become more than the sun as star nations return. The eagles have carried us here to belong as the buffalo bring us the turns of the earth. For the moons of the sky to be one with the sun and alone with a split put together in water for life. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberto. What an amazing hour plus you've given us of word and image and silence. Our bodies extend more than we generally know. And I think you've given us an experience of that sort. I look forward to a time in the future when we can welcome you to campus here in Olympia on the traditional lands of the people of the Salish Sea. You've given us so much to think about, and there's a multitude of questions that have come piling in through the Q&A, and I would encourage people to keep those coming. There are questions and comments. I can engage with them. I'll be able to copy and paste a few into the chat. I know some of you will need to leave at 1 p.m. Pacific time, and that's absolutely fine. I'm able to stay for an extra 5 or 10 minutes after that. So we can at least get a few of these comments and questions included on the recording. Let me start with one that says, I don't have an articulate question, but this has really helped me. I have been struggling with the apocalypse as well, and this helps a lot. Thank you. And then they also say they would love a link to the vid mentioned in the press, which I think is to the Saloma YouTube, and I can dig that up. Roberto emailed that to me earlier today, so I can drop that link into the chat. Another wonderful question has come in asking after your modalities, and I'll drop that into the chat as well. Wonderful sharing, Roberto. Mil gracias. What are the capillaries that feed your visual and verbal ways of communicating? That is, in what ways are the two modalities kin and mutually cross-generative? And by extension, are there limitations where one modality becomes blind or deaf to the other? Again, many thanks.
Wow. So I started off as a visual artist. I mean, I've been drawing ever since basically shortly after I was born. And I did move to San Francisco early on in my life to try to become a painter. And then I found myself reading poetry, and I knew that I had stuff to work out in language, because language is, I mean, English is my second language, and so, you know, I had to choose one or the other. I mean, I had to work a job full time, and it turns out that I could get more writing done than I could drawing if I was working full time. So, and I felt like I had some of the most important things for me to work out in my life, in my writing. So I've gone back and forth in writing and drawing in my life. So, I mean, in a sense, my drawing is primary, but in terms of how I've worked in my life, my writing has become primary because I spend most of my energy in that. And now I'm coming back to drawing. I mean, these drawings, you know, I go through periods of drawing. I can't write anymore, but the texts came about from me in the last couple of years of the Trump administration. And I thought to myself, what can I do in this horrifying situation? And my response was to make a drawing every morning and text it out to friends. And that's what I did. And I was really happy about the drawings because they were happening by themselves. I mean, I don't know how it goes from one thing to the other. I mean, I do have to have other things that feed my creative life. I like to ride my bike. I like to be outside. I want to get away from the screen. So I don't know if that really answers it, but that's kind of what I have. Thank you for that question, for that response.
Thanks for that. Roberto. I've added a link to the video for the Saloma Panameña. And I'm also going to drop a link into a series of the tech drawings from the Woodland Pattern exhibit. So if you're interested out there to explore more of Roberto's drawings sort of on your own time. And I think there's a wonderful essay that's posted there as well. There's a question about the mullahs as well, Roberto, and I'll post that, I'll post that into the chat here. See if I can get that. Asking, what was the significance of the pairing of the mullahs? I apologize if I missed this. It sounded like Roberto was emotionally connected to the mullah partner he had gifted. Is there a significance to gifting and thereby separating the pair from one another?
For me, there is. I mean, the mullahs apparently come in pairs because that's the way that generally Guna women wear the mullahs. They have one in the front and one in the back. And they're all, most of the time I've seen that they've been the same, but there are mullahs that are kind of sewn together that aren't the same, like that. And so for me, it's just, you know, I mean, I've given one of a pair to my friend Peter O'Leary. I've given one of a pair to my friend Will Alexander. I've given mullahs to other people in my life. It's just something that I like to share. It's not something that was sort of determined by the people that made it. Thank you for that.
And I know we're going into a bonus round here, and some people will have to leave. But I think we'll take another few questions. Does that work for you, Roberto?
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Here's another question, really a comment, an invitation. Curious to hear more about your connection to the land on the Isthmus of Madison, the community and native people Ho-Chunk Nation.
I work with some Ho-Chunk people. Ho-Chunk is taught at the school that where I work. And beyond that, that's my connection. I don't know much about the culture, but I'm very grateful to be working at the Indian Community School, and I love the fact that those languages are supported there. So.
Great. Another question that often comes up when a poet or writer pays a visit. How do you go about getting your work out to people? Do you use publishers or self-publish?
I have self-published a lot. I've been lucky enough to publish through presses. More recently, I send out my drawings to people when I can. Anymore, I'm just sorry. So anymore, I'm just lucky enough to be asked to read every once in a while, and that kind of is sustaining for me in sharing my work with others.
Thanks, Roberto. And since we're in the bonus round, since we're over time, I think we should bring up this question. I'm particularly interested in the Dogen quote that you shared. Time does not go away. Obviously, there are a great many ways to interpret that. I would be interested to hear how you interpret it and how it informs your work.
I've been looking into Dogen recently and taking some classes. There's a writer that she's a Zen priest, Zen priest Shinshu Roberts. She wrote this book on being time, which is the Uji Festival in the Shobogenzo. And this is Dogen Shobogenzo. And it's a very deep and profound thing to try to understand. So I can't claim to really understand it, but for me, I think that means that, it's like Faulkner said, the past is never past. And that's a way for me to look at at history and prehistory, that it's still around in some way. That's how I look at it.
Thanks, Roberto. There's another question that's actually related to time, and I think you've touched on it, but it might be worth circling back to. How long did it take you to write poetry and plus the art as well? I think this is a big picture question, but also maybe a more focused question on the work that you were sharing today. This is from a student who's also, I think, engaging in a practice that combines poetry and art, and maybe just curious about figuring out how your day-to-day looks like in terms of writing the poetry, making the art, and so forth.
Yeah. So thank you very much, everybody, for all these questions. I'm really grateful. I don't know. I mean, I've tried to make making a part of my life. I generally like to start my day with an hour of writing or an hour of drawing. Those texts that I was showing, I spent about an hour doing. They're 5x7. And generally what I like to do is, because I have other things I have to do. I have to work my job and I have responsibilities to my wife and our puppy and everything else. And generally what I like to do is like kind of, have an hour of writing a day, an hour or 2 or 3, if I can manage it, of reading. I work better that way than just like just being obsessed about things and having my whole day consumed by them. I like to do just a little bit at a time. And generally, for a number of years, I write something in the morning on a Monday, and I work on it about an hour a day or so for the week, and then I leave it alone. And if I come back to it and I like it, I keep it, and then I just keep going. And my drawings, I mean, the larger drawings that I was doing for a while recently take me longer. These larger drawings, I didn't show any of those, but those take me like 5 or 6 hours. And so I had to keep the scale kind of small to be able to do what I want to do with them. But thank you very much.
Here's another give back. I think this is in reference to one of the texts that was shared. I love Jaguar becoming tapir person, and then a heart emoji done old school.
Thank you.
Another question, and that is, are the Caribbean islands a part of Abya Yala?
Yeah, I would definitely think so. My great grandmother was from Martinique, so I would hope so. Yeah, of course, totally. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, I'm trying to put the Caribbean and indigeneity together somehow, but beyond color too.
Great. We've got 1 or 2 more, and that is, could you say more about your repeated use of the word recognizability and what it does in your work? Thank you.
I never knew I used that word that much. Recognizability. I mean, I'm mostly trying to recognize patterns, I think. Recognize others, to understand my attempt to understand things or to be understood. That's what I have.
Great. And then a final question that I think builds from what you were just sharing. Your poetry and art is very rich. How do you come across the things that inspire you? What does the process of gathering look like?
I love books. I mean, that's for me. I'd rather spend money on a book than almost anything else besides a CD. So I acquire what I can from books. At the same time, I never manage to read as much as I want to. I want to read a lot more than I can, but I surround myself with my books. And I listen to a lot of music. I go through long periods of starting my day with listening to an hour of music. That music is a really big part of my life. I try to listen to all kinds of different kinds of music. And recognizability has something to do with music too. I mean, there's something about if I like a piece of music, then I feel like I recognize something in it. So music and books, and every once in a while I let myself just wander in an art museum and look at artwork. you know, I over the last 20 years, I've really enjoyed riding my bike. So I spend a lot of time just being outside in the parks and looking at the sky, looking at the horizon, the lake, the birds. I see many animals here in Milwaukee. I'm lucky enough to work at the Indian Community School where they have a nice sort of forest, and I see lots of deer. I see all different kinds of frogs, and there's a pair of nesting sandhill cranes there that last year they had one chick and this year they have two. And so I'm actually I was going to be a veterinarian. I used to, in Panama, there are very many very interesting insects and animals. And I used to obsess about insects and animals when I was a kid in Panama. And my whole life, I raised a lot of animals. I had 220 rabbits at one point, 50 guinea pigs and 5 dogs and 20 cats and birds and mice and gerbils, chickens. My mom was kind of from the country in Panama. So animals are a big part of my life, and they always have been. We have a beautiful puppy now that we love dearly. So.
Roberto, thank you so much. We've got one last comment. It's really a give back. Thank you for sharing your art with us. It is so inspiring and really gives me a lot of insight into all the different beautiful forms in which art can take place.
Thank you very much.
And I think we should conclude. I will just extend an invitation to you, Roberto, to make it out here to Olympia sooner than later, so we can welcome you to our campus, and we can give you the compliment to tropical lung with the temperate forest lung that we have up here. Thank you, Roberto.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.